Good evening. Today is August 14, 2021, and this is a special Saturday episode of New Paradigms. I'm your host, Sargis Sangari. Today, my guest is my dear friend, Michael Yon. Michael has been to the Darien Gap again, along with Chuck Holton, and he has brought back new information showing the humanitarian effects of what we're doing as far as our U.S. foreign policy is concerned when it comes to the immigration policies and the migration that is coming into our country. With that said, today there was an earthquake in Haiti. It affected the Bahamas, the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, the Puerto Rico, Turks, and Caicos Islands, to include Cuba. That is probably going to go in again, affect more of the crisis that we're dealing with and exacerbate what we have to see coming to our southern borders. With that said, I want to initially start with a short video portion of what Mike had covered when he interviewed 3 Cuban refugees trying to make it to our country. After that, we're going to introduce Mike and we're going to discuss what he saw when he was at the Darien Gap again.
You from?
United States.
United States?
Yeah. How long did it take you to get through the gap? You're very fit, so fast, I think.
My brother live in United States, Los Angeles, California.
Oh, really? In California?
We go every people here.
Yeah.
Every Cubans here go to the United States. American dream.
How long?
All my families there.
All in California?
Yeah, in California, in other states, but all in United States.
How'd you learn to speak English so well?
Because I work in Cuba in the market, in the hotels.
Yeah.
Guadalajara Beach, Pesquero in the Orient, in Cuba, and talk with the people. Sold I sold pieces of artesania.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
like
sold
arts and
artesania in
crafts.
Cuba, yeah.
Yeah. How long did it take you to get through the Darien Gap? How long did it take you to walk?
How long?
Walking. the jungle.
5 days.
5 days. Well, you guys are fit. All together?
Inside the hunger,
All jungle.
for the river.
Was it dangerous?
Yeah, many people dead.
In your group
Yeah.
died? How many?
I see seven, eight people.
In your group?
Yeah, in the street, when the river up,
Flood.
people, yeah, man.
They were Cubans?
Yeah, Cubans, black people, black people from Haiti,
Right.
yeah, many people there.
That's terrible.
It's not easy, but
Yeah. In your group?
yeah,
they died.
my group is 55 persons.
Yeah.
Yeah,
55?
Yeah, the group is 55 or 75.
How many died out of 55 or 75? How many?
It's depend because one people, two people.
I mean, in your group, how many?
Sometimes all the group,
Yeah. sometimes.
sleep and the river up, and all the people that
Sleep beside the river.
yeah.
Yeah.
The river is and the theft.
Robbers.
Yeah, that people 4 times.
Robbed you 4
Yeah.
times
4 times. Me 2 times.
with guns.
Yeah, with
Yeah.
guns.
Did you keep your
Yes,
phone?
and
or-
knife.
And knife.
Would you describe them, please? Describe the robbers.
Very simple.
Where they? What country do you think they're from? The robbers.
Panama.
Do you think the robbers
Aquí en Panamá.
are from here, from Panama,
From Panama, Costa Rica, all the countries.
Colombia?
No, Colombia is back.
No,
No,
the
se
robbers.
dice los
Colombia.
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 Colombia is.
No, pero más difícil aquí en Panamá.
Sí.
Were they on horses? The robbers were on horses. Were they riding horses?
Yeah.
Like riding
Yeah,
horses?
yeah.
Okay. Did they have
And
guns?
walking, too.
Did they have guns?
Yeah.
Many people died.
From the robbers or from the river?
No,
robbers
from the
killed
robbers.
No.
them? You saw the robbers kill them? What did they do?
Nothing.
I mean, they shoot them or stab them or what?
Shoot. Because in 2 times, that people take all the money. And, 3 times, take. No money, no nothing. All my life.
Right.
And many people say I don't have money. And that look the back and you have money. Boom. That. very common.
They were shooting women too?
Yes.
Women too.
How many people? How many gangsters?
Women come with children.
They were
1 year.
They shot a woman with children?
Yes.
What happened to the children?
Killed.
Killed.
They killed the children? Where was she from? Or the children and the mother?
Cuba,
From Haiti,
Venezuela,
from Venezuela.
Haiti.
But did you see this happen? You saw them kill a woman and children?
Yes. So this is it. This is storming the castle.
Some drama's going on down here. We need an oil. Look at the squeaking armor from the police. They don't have their mask.
Mike, there's a reason you're the premier, the most experienced American combat correspondent, because of the fact that you take chances and get into these areas to be able to show us what's happening on the ground. First of all, much appreciated. Thank you for everything you do as a patriot. God bless you. And tell us, what was your experience this time around in the Darien Gap?
Just got back from Darien Gap. This is I spent months down there this year. It started off right after the Joe Biden inauguration. I flew straight to the Texas border at El Paso, was in Texas and also in Mexico and looked at that border area, flew down to Colombia, flew up and checked the border area there as people were entering Darien Gap from all over the world. That's where they enter Darien Gap, is from the Colombia side. I went into the Darien Gap only slightly, just like an hour into the jungle that direction, jumped in an airplane, flew up to Panama, then went down into the Darien Gap from the Panama side to meet migrants who were coming out, the ones who survived. Approximately 10% are dying going through. We don't actually have an audit on how many go in or how many come out. Nobody knows those numbers. So we derive the 10% guesstimate based on just hundreds of interviews over the many months. It looks like about 10%. Some people think more. Some people think it's only about 1%. If you hear somebody say 1%, disregard them. They have no idea what they're talking about. They haven't been there. But it's really north of 10%. As you can see with those two guys, that's a normal interview that if we talk to the next person, they'll say similar. The next person will say similar. And so they walk for, depending on numerous factors, the fitness level of the migrants, the weather at that time. Right now is rainy season, and also whether or not they get lost, how many times they get robbed. The most fit people, the Rambos who don't get lost and the weather's good, they can make it in 4 days. That's a exceptionally fit person with an exceptionally lucky everything, right? These guys made it in 5 days, which is still exceptional. Most people are going to take more like a week. Some people will take, people are lost out there and they starve. Like, for instance, right now, there's people out there that we just heard of the other day that are just out there. They've been there for 2 or 3 weeks. They can't go forward. They can't go back. So they're just depending on handout food from migrants who are passing through. So, and we've heard many stories. Some of them do eventually make it out alive. Others just starve to death out there or just pass away and people have to step over their bodies. Others just get lost because it's very easy to get lost out there in that jungle. Some of the most intense jungle in the world. You have to go over 3 mountains. The third mountain, they call it Montaña de la Muerta, something like mountain, basically Death Mountain. And it's the mountain where so many people fall off of. That's the third mountain. And people get lost out there as well. So when one group gets lost, I don't know if you've ever been trekking or out in the jungle a lot, but people will tend to bunch up. So you'll end up with groups of people, right? People don't like to walk alone in the jungle. And so they'll get into groups. And that's why you'll hear almost everybody talking about our group, right? I've trekked all over the world, not just as a war correspondent, but just trekking, right? And people will group up. So you'll hear them typically talking about groups. And what will happen is a group will take a false path, thinking they're going the right way, and they'll be out there for a couple of days going the wrong direction, but they leave a path as well. They reinforce that path, and other people follow them. So they're like submarines. These groups are like submarines passing each other. One gets to the end and goes, this isn't the way, but they've already invested 2 or 3 days going the wrong direction. Then they start going back, and then they run into other groups who are following them. So it's constant. So there's people that just vanish out there we never hear from again. Entire groups vanish. And so when they finally make it through the Darien Gap, those who do survive, and keep in mind, a lot of the people going through there, they have 1-year-old children. Some are actually literally pregnant. And so there's people out there. The reason that they're bringing these children, last year they weren't doing this. Actually, last year it was shut down from the pandemic. But before it shut down from the pandemic, they weren't bringing children. It was very uncommon to see young children. But now that with the Biden policy of if you show up with a baby, that's your golden ticket, walk right in the door. Now they're coming through with massive numbers of children. And so the children are dying out there constantly. You see the children dying. They're dying from waterborne illnesses. The way that people die out there, there's several major ways. One is they fall off of that third mountain in particular. They fall all the time, but that's the one that claims a lot of lives. And then they waterborne illnesses, or they drown in the river, either trying to swim across rivers. They have to do many river crossings, or they set up and sleep at nighttime beside the rivers. And this place it's a rainforest. And so there's mountains. So you end up with flash floods all the time. And so, bodies getting swept down the river, wrapped in their tents. You get 2 o'clock in the morning, you get a flash flood. Most of these people are not jungle people. They're coming from places like Port-au-Prince. They're coming from Havana. They're city people, right? They don't know anything about the jungle. They're out there pitching their tents. And one group about 2 months ago, they went out there, and it was 40 in that group, and 20 died in a flood, right? Most of them died in one flood, and a couple fell. But swept away one night. So that was 50% of that group died. That was abnormally high. But these sorts of things are quite normal. You will meet some groups that actually make it through and nobody dies, but those are balanced out by another group where half of them die, right? Now, another thing that many people die from, as those Cuban gentlemen were talking about, is the robbers. In particular, it's the Indians who live out there. I go out with the Indians. That's how I get out there, is with the Indians. So literally the Indians that I go out with, some of those are literally doing the robbing and raping. That's the jungle. That's the law of the jungle. They're out there like wild Comanches, basically. And so that jungle is theirs. So people that go through the jungle year after year, many are raped. All the pretty, they all get raped. That's what they say, and that's what the migrants will say as well. And so, including children. And so, as you heard the Cubans say, I've sent that video to a few people. It's not published yet, so you're the first one that's going to publish it. People say, oh, the guy's emotions don't match up with his story. I'm like, that's not true. I'm telling you, you can ask another 100 people, and you're going to get 100 similar stories. So this is through space and time. Over the years, everybody's telling the same stories over and over and over. They're not sitting somewhere and making this up and sharing information. Whether or not he witnessed this, I have no idea. But I can tell you one thing. The women are getting raped and the men and murdered every single day, including right now. As you watch this, there's people out there doing this. And right now, this month, it looks like about 20,000 will come through that village, Bajo Chiquito, this month. 20,000. Keep in mind, earlier I just said that north of 10% are dying. So that'll be 2,000 or so die out there in the jungle this month. So that's almost 100 today then will be out there dying, being raped, shot, murdered, falling off the mountain, drowning, dying of waterborne diseases. You'll see in the newspapers they're dying of snake bites, but none that I've talked with have said that anybody died from a snake bite. It's falling, murders, getting lost, every type of illness out there. One man, he was Ecuadorian. He actually he had an Armenian name and an Armenian mixed Arab name actually, but he said he was Palestinian, but he's lived in Ecuador for years. He followed his Cuban wife out there. In fact, he just sent me some messages yesterday. We call him 22 days because he was out there for 22 days. His Cuban wife left him in the jungle. She's in America now. And he finally made it out after 22 days. He was one of those that's left behind out there. And he said that when he was stuck out there, the vultures were landing in the trees above him, waiting to eat him. And there are a lot of vultures out there, man. You've not seen so many vultures. And, vultures are one of the ways that we used to track people, by the way. And that place is just loaded with vultures. And he said, some Haitians came along and fed him for a couple days. And then the Haitians had to go. Then some Cameroonians from Africa came along, and the Cameroonians fed him for a couple days. He said, all the Latins just left me out there, and everybody from South America and the Cubans, they just left me. But the black people from Africa and Haiti, they helped me a lot. So now he says he's thanking Haitians all the time when he meets them, and they think he's crazy because he's like, oh, thank you, your people saved my life. It's funny, I've heard, I grew up in Florida, so we heard a lot of bad stories about Haitians in Florida. But when it comes to that jungle, the Haitians are turning out to be heroes. I hear all kind of Haitian hero stories with Haitians helping people and saving people and dragging them out of the jungle still alive and that sort of thing. So, in these sorts of situations, people, we see who will help and who will not. Right now, the Biden policy is a policy of death. We see it on the southern border. Our southern border estimates are north of 200,000 are going to make it in. I don't know how many it's going to be this month. I might shoot up there in the next few days. I'm in Panama still. But down here in the Darien Gap, it's north of 20,000. So this is about 1/10 of it. But what's very interesting down here is the people that are coming through the Darien Gap are people that can't get visas to come into places like Mexico first. They have to go to 3 different countries in South America first. The Haitians and the Cubans will often go to Suriname or Brazil. Some will go to Ecuador. So it's those 3 countries, Suriname, Ecuador, Brazil, and because you don't need a visa. So you don't need a visa to get to those 3 countries. So many of the Africans will come to those 3 countries. Many Asians, I meet Bangladeshis every day. When I'm out there, I meet Indians, Sikh people as well from India. I meet Nepalese. I spent a year in Nepal, so I've been to. Are you there?
I'm here, buddy. I'm listening.
Are you there? So I
Mike,
meet Nepalese out there all the time. Some Pakistanis.
No, I hear you, buddy. Listen, I've been there. As you were saying, look, I was there as a lieutenant with my mortar platoon when we were doing our ex-evals or evaluations at the Jungle Warfare Training Center in Panama. And I got to tell you, that 1 month, being a guy who was in shape at the time, I could run fast as I ran my 2 miles was in 11 minutes, 20 seconds with boots on and a 35-pound pack on. That's pretty fast. But I got to tell you, when I went to Panama in that shape, that jungle really takes a bite out of you. We had a number of heat casualties from my soldiers who were the fittest. You get to deal with the howling monkeys that are constantly throwing feces and urine at you. You have to even worry about the frogs when you're cutting through the machetes there, the water moccasins that could come up and bite you any given time if you're in the wrong place in the river. It is a very dangerous location that you have to deal with. So I've been there. I was in that environment as a young, healthy officer. And I can just imagine when you take somebody who's a civilian who's lived in a city and then now you plop them into this area during the rainy season, and you have individuals who are saying that that's not true. There's no way that individual would have any harm come to them. If that's the case, go ahead, try to negotiate the Darien Gap, see if you can survive. So I hear you loud and clear. I understand exactly what's going on, and it is because of the type of work you have done that covered, what is happening on the southern border. Unfortunately, I think these gentlemen that are on video right now that are from Cuba, I would not be surprised if the U.S. government under Biden would probably send these individuals back just because they're from Cuba and trying to seek refuge in the United States. Tell us a bit more. I know that you're planning on coming up into the southern border later on, but do you see how we can fix this, or do you think that the administration is just going to be going down this path regardless?
Well, it's all about policy, really. You know, I just got back from Lithuania. I was in Lithuania for about 3 weeks, talking with military, talking with intelligence, members of parliament. I was out on their border. You know, Belarus is weaponizing migrants there in Lithuania, pushing migrants over. Of course, Lithuania started to push back about a week ago. So that's actually slowed it down for now. It's all about, you have to have, in particular, in the HOP, human osmotic pressure, there's the push and the pull, right? The push factor and the pull factor. Many of the people are just coming to the United States for the pull factor. When we talk with them, whether it's in Colombia or Mexico, Panama, wherever, they feel like once they make it to the United States, everything's going to be like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Everything's going to be fine, which it may be compared to their country of origin. But the United States obviously can't take them all. We're not that big. We're not that rich as people seem to think. But so on that HOP, human osmotic pressure, you have to have the policy that is very clear that you're not going to be able, if you illegally cross the borders, you're not just going to be able to, you know, assimilate, not that they will assimilate in many cases, and then just, you know, come in by the millions, which is what is happening now. I was just down in Morocco, Northern Africa. They're pushing them over into Ceuta, Spain, and also Melilla, which are two Spanish country, European cities that are in the EU, that are in Africa. For instance, Melilla and Ceuta. If you make it into Melilla or Ceuta, which are in Africa, you are then also in the European Union while in Africa. So once you're in the European Union, you're free to go anywhere you want to go in the European Union, anywhere you can go, which is, you know, there's no effective borders. And so we see the same thing. The big pull in the EU is Germany. When we talk to people in Morocco or in Greece, I was just down in Greece with Chuck Holton. We were in also Morocco together. Everybody wants to get to Germany. Germany is what's providing the pull factor for Europe. When I was just in Lithuania in 5 of their camps, talking with many migrants, many were from Africa, many were from also from Iraq. Many are Yazidi, actually. Some spoke German. I interviewed them actually in German. Many were Kurdish. Others were Arabs from Iraq, and some Syrians and others. They're pushing through Belarus to get into Lithuania, to get into Germany. Germany is the pull factor, right? So it's this, you need a barrier, you need men to guard it, and you need policy that's not providing the pull factor. Now, people often say, you know, the wall will stop, you know, these things. No, it won't. Walls will work, but I grew up in Florida. We constantly had huge numbers of Cubans that would come over and practically in bathtubs, dying out in the Caribbean constantly, still coming up. As long as they know they can get to Florida, then they would be dying out in the sea to get there. Likewise, we were just in Morocco. They push through the Mediterranean Sea. It's like the Caribbean. They're dying out there constantly, right? But they're still going. Likewise, now in Darien Gap, which has been going on for years, but never in this epic proportion. With more than 10% dying, they're still trying to go. So you have to have, now the Panamanian authorities here will tell you, we can't stop them. That's not true. The Panamanian authorities stopped the migration during the pandemic for almost a full year. They squeezed that valve right off because the policy was, you're not going to be able to go forward to Costa Rica after you make it to Panama. So they just stopped coming, right? That meant they also stopped going to Colombia to begin with. They didn't stack up. Right now there's more than 10,000 in Nicocli, Colombia. I was down there recently, and also Turbo, Colombia. I was not there. That's close to Nicocli, but they're stacking up. You can see reports of huge numbers of migrants that are there. They can't get across because there's not enough boats to get into the Darien Gap, to get into Panama. But it's about policy. Policy is number one. Otherwise, they're going to keep coming, and the United States and Europe and other places are just going to fill. We're not going to be able to There's only so many we can take at a time. We're way over the saturation point. And so they're going to.
Mike, I lost you there for a second, buddy. As we're setting up to get Mike back again, politics is key, of course, to all this. President Obama built a wall on the southern border. President Trump built a wall on the southern border. The difference between President Trump's wall and President Obama's wall was that they used the same materials. It was just certain feet difference as far as which wall was higher than the other wall. And it became a stopping point when it came to the politicians in DC, because the only way they can keep power is to divide the American people against each other to be able to win their seats. Well, the same individuals who are doing this, there's blood on their hands on both sides of the aisle, both Republicans and Democrats. You have blood on your hands of all those children and men and women that are dying coming to the Darien Gap. You're the one who caused this. You're the ones who continue to fight over the reason why your political party needs to stay in power. And currently, under the current administration, you owe this. This is on your hands. What is coming through that border is basically the tone of leadership that you're setting for these individuals. It is shame that even when patriots like Michael Yon and Chuck Colton and others cover these issues at a cost to themselves, that you refuse to meet and be able to deal with these issues. You will take videos and these pictures and you will use only for your advancement for your political party rather than addressing the issue. The Department of Homeland Security lead himself stated recently that this is a problem. There's a problem that we may not be able to recover from. And unfortunately, if you're not going to listen to the individuals in your administration that you have appointed to be the lead for you, then how are you going to resolve this issue? The first thing we always said in the military is through the problem-solving technique, you got to define the problem. And until you're able to define that problem, in this case, it's lies on policy's sake, we're not going to be able to get anywhere. Mike, I'm glad we got you back again. I do want to shift a little bit from here to Afghanistan, because you were one of the first war correspondents who really kind of set the stage on what is happening in Afghanistan when we started fighting there. And you did affect policy. What you did, the work you did affect some policy under the previous administrations. What do you make of what's happening in Afghanistan now?
Well, I warned about this in 2006. In fact, if someone were to go back and read my 12 dispatches from Afghanistan in 2006, they would see that basically this is what's unfolding here in 2021. So it's not any particular president. It's not Biden. It's not Trump. It's not Obama. It's the whole chain from the beginning. The fact is, I left Iraq, went to Afghanistan, spent some time rolling around there, and went back to Iraq. And I was just going back and forth between Iraq and Afghanistan, checked the war in Philippines and that sort of thing, and just stayed in those conflicts for years. And it was actually quite clear that Afghanistan was going to go this way. It was just obvious. Excuse me. I did see one ray of hope back during the time that General Petraeus was in charge. I saw that because he was more realistic about what was achievable. That was one of the biggest problems in Afghanistan, was a psychotic break, you might say, in what was achievable and what was not. I spent more than half of my life in other countries beyond the United States, more than 80 countries. Right now I'm in Panama, right? I've spent, years in Asia, years in Europe, and years in the Middle East. And so I've seen many countries. The idea that Americans, we have this man on the moon idea problem Americans have. We did this, we put people on the moon, we brought peace to Europe, that sort of thing. And therefore we can make Afghans suddenly, treat women the way other, American women are treated and that sort of thing. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen until generations past. I spent a year in Nepal. I spent 2 years in Afghanistan. Nepal and Afghanistan actually have very similar problem sets. So for those who have been to Nepal but have not been to Afghanistan, the situation is quite similar insofar as huge amounts of mountains and valleys, no roads, no bridges. 80% of the population are outside of just a few cities. In Nepal, of course, it's Kathmandu and Pokhara are the main cities, a few other smaller ones. In Afghanistan, it's similar. You've got, for instance, Kabul and Jalalabad and a few others. And so most of the people are in those cities or outside of those cities. And there's just no bridges or roads. They're like little planets, basically. Many different cultures. A lot of people, seem to think that Afghans are all, one sort of people. No, there's dozens of sorts of people there. Pashtun are the majority. It's funny, people are surprised now that the Pashtun people are attacking even as we withdraw. That's what they did with the Soviets. Anybody who's studied Pashtun fighting habits, one of the things that Pashtuns do is they always, always, always pursue a retreating enemy. If they see an enemy is running away, you there?
I'm here, buddy. I'm here.
All right. Pashtun always pursue a fleeing enemy or someone they perceive as fleeing. That was the tribal leaders back during the times of the Soviets. They had their meetings and whatnot, and they got together and they said, why don't we some were arguing, just let them go, just let the Soviets go, let the Russians go, and the fighting will end. Others said, no, we're going to keep fighting. They actually were pursuing them across the border outside of Afghanistan. So the Soviets had to reinforce to get their troops out, which is what we're doing right now. We're reinforcing, sending more combat troops into Afghanistan to get our people out, same as the Soviets did. This was all very clear because in large part, our expectations didn't match what was realistically possible. We can't even I just was all over the United States this year too, by the way. I spent, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks in Washington, D.C. between the end part of 2020 and the beginning and through the inauguration. And Washington, D.C. is an unsafe city. It's completely unsafe. I was just up in Atlanta, very unsafe city. I was up in Portland, out there with Antifa and BLM, watching these guys, incredibly violent. I was at the January 6th, attack at the Capitol. We can't even control the United States. We can't even control Miami. We can't control Atlanta or Washington, D.C. When I say control, I don't mean despotic. I mean, criminality is just out of the roof. And yet we think we can go over to Afghanistan and suddenly, everything's going to be daisies and all the children are going to be in school singing. No, this is at least 100-year process, minimum of 100 years. Let me go back to Nepal. I spent a year in Nepal running around there. Nepal is about 60% or 60 years, let's say, ahead of Afghanistan. I say 60 years because about 60 or so years ago is when Nepal really started opening up. And then outside influence started coming in. And then, people started building bridges, literally bridges, because often the difference between you being extremely remote and not being extremely remote is just a small bridge. I mean, there's gorges out there with rivers and that sort of thing. And maybe just 200 or 300 is a main road. But since you can't get to that main road without, hiking several days around downriver and finally crossing somewhere or upriver, usually, that little bridge is the difference. But you need thousands of bridges like that, thousands. So many of the bridges that you see built in Nepal are built by actually NGOs. They're also built by Switzerland and other countries. We've come out and built some bridges. But until you have the bridges, you don't have. So Afghanistan's in the same situation. They're just out there with no infrastructure, no schools. Even if they have schools, we go out and build a school, and what do they teach there? There's no teachers for it. So we're talking the people that I met with Joe McCaffrey about this a couple times, and Joe McCaffrey, would say, he was brave in saying it's going to take 15 years. And I said, sir, it's not going to take 15 years. It's going to take a century, period. You're not going to get Afghanistan up to the level of a developing country for at least 100 years, period. We just can't do it. It's because you're trying to change the software in people's brains, for starters. And first of all, you have to have the hardware, which is the bridges and the roads and the schools and that sort of thing to even reach them, right? And so, and most of the people in Afghanistan are illiterate. The ones who are literate mostly are speaking Pashtun, which is not an access language. You need to speak an access language such as English, French, German. What are the access languages? Russian, Chinese, something that can get you onto the main highway of learning, right? And so they're out there in these, backwater languages, and they don't even read or write in those languages. So again, 100-year project minimum, unrealistic expectations on what we could do there, because most of the people that sit back, and I talk with Americans when I go around America, they're like, we have to go to Afghanistan for women's rights. Where do you come up with this stuff? That's insane. I mean, some of my closest friends think that we could just go over there and bring a bucket of women's rights and suddenly the place is going to have women's rights. I mean, it's absolutely insane, especially when we have the United States. We've got our own problems to deal with. The world is quite large. I spend most of my time on perpetual reconnaissance overseas, more than 80 countries, right? I lived in Europe for 6 years and most of the rest all around Asia, Middle East. I'm now in Panama again, down in Central America, Mexico, been all over these places. It's not that we are a tiny little speck on this earth compared to the problem set out there. So the best that we can do is go out and help judiciously, that we're going to just pour trillions of dollars to and leave behind what amounts to what is the largest narco state in human history. That's Afghanistan, with now a very well-armed Taliban, a very well-trained Taliban, a Taliban that knows they can beat the Soviets, the British, now the United States. We can wipe them out. That's no problem. I mean, if you want to commit war crimes, we can end the war very quickly. And I don't mean using weapons of mass destruction. We can win. That's no problem. But we're not going in there to win a war. We won the war way back early on with just special operations forces and CIA. We beat back the Taliban. But then we came in with this idea, we're going to make this place into, Mayberry. And that's where we lost, because we had unrealistic expectations. Likewise with down here in Panama. Panama, the problem for cutting off the migration flow through Panama is not here in Panama. It's the pull factor in the United States that's pulling migrants out of their own countries that are not even at war. Many countries are not at war, but they're coming here because of the pull factor, period. And most of us watching this are either directly migrants or we're descendants of migrants. I am descendant of migrants, right? And some of my current family members are first generation migrants that have married into my family. So we all get it. We don't need the briefing about we're all migrants unless you're a Native American, and they're migrants too. Everybody in North America is a migrant, including the Native Americans. So, I mean, the fact is, we get it. We get it. But there's only so many that we can take. And we're way over the saturation point at this point. I see the United States at this point. I've been in many wars, spent years in wars. And I'm not just a war correspondent that goes out and takes pictures. That's junior high school level war correspondent stuff. You have to study other things, pandemic, famine. You have to study migration. You have to study information war many other things to try to pull together and make a comprehensive paradigm that fits, that is predictive, right? And that's why I was so far ahead on Iraq and Afghanistan and Japan, Korea issues and Hong Kong, is because I've been working for years to develop a paradigm, the name of your show, that is quite predictive. And in my paradigm of what's happening now in the United States, we are clearly heading into civil war. I don't even see a way out of it at this point. I know there is some way out of it that some visionary can see. I can see a way out of it, but that would include having extremely strong leadership, which we do not have. Look at the military, forced vaccinations coming down the road, which is an illegal order. As you know, as a retired military officer, it's an illegal order. Any officer that then issues this order and pushes this order is committing an illegal act, but they'll never be held accountable for it. I mean, so we don't have strong leadership at the highest levels to avert civil war right now. But that's what we're facing. So the last thing on my mind at this time is Afghanistan. I mean, Afghanistan is important. Yes, it is. But we have other important things that are even more important that we need to face. And that's, for instance, this distraction with the pandemic. The pandemic is quite real. I was one of the very first back in early January to start warning privately about it, and publicly by mid-January of 2020, I was wearing a mask. I was wearing a mask by January 11th, 2020, at least a month before most people even heard about this, right? So I've been ahead of this on the pandemic and other things. I'm telling you now, we are heading into a civil war in the United States. We have to lock down this border. These migrants are going to be weaponized. They are clearly going to be, this is an old tactic. It's happening in the EU right now. Belarus pumping migrants in. Erdogan down in Turkey. Lukashenko up in Belarus and Erdogan down in Turkey pumping migrants in. There's nothing but disaster on the horizon without strong leadership. It's going to put an end. The pandemic is a distraction to what's happening with migration and other issues. They're destroying our economy right now. Right now, China is starting to close the port down. They're using the pandemic as their excuse to close down a port. And this is probably going to ripple. This is why I've been warning since January of 2020. Stock up on food. Stock up on everything you need. At least 2 years supply of food. You need to have water security because PANFA war, pandemic, famine, war. Every big pandemic brings, and this is not a big pandemic, it's a widespread pandemic. On the scale of pandemics, this is rather minor, but our reaction is major. The reaction is major. The pandemic itself is rather minor. But on the any PANFA war, anytime you get a big pandemic, you'll get a famine and a war. And this is our reaction is quite big. And that's why since January of 2020, I've been saying stock up on food. You see the food prices are going through the roof. Highly suggest any medications that you need, you get them right now. This is no joke. This is no drill. You need to stock up on water. You need to stock up on food. I mean, water security so that you can pump your own water, have your own ability to purify your water. If you live in downtown Manhattan, then, your challenges may be bigger than others. People that live out in the country suddenly will have can have a significant advantage. But this is what we're facing right now is everything is coming together. It's a perfect storm for a disaster. We have information war going on at epic scale, creating race hate. Back in 2014, I warned about a company called Bell Pottinger when I was covering the Thai fighting and the Thai coup, which I was right in the middle of. I don't mean right in the middle watching it on TV. I mean, I was right in the middle. I got shot in the leg. Actually, it was just a ricochet. Guy near me killed. These sorts of things. Or that was 2010. And then in 2014, I was in the middle of that coup as well. And these information warriors like Bell Pottinger were creating hatred in Thailand in 2014. I called them out. People said, no, that's nonsense. Then they got caught in 2017 doing it in South Africa, creating race hate, creating specifically to kill white people, right? That's what Bell Pottinger was doing, that making Thais fight Thais. And in South America, they're making black people fight white people. And Bell Pottinger went extinct because of that when they got caught in 2017. But we see, when you study warfare at the higher levels, you have to study pandemic. You have to study famine. You have to study war, of course. You have to study information war. You have to study migration, right? And information war in the United States is so intense right now. It's creating race hatred where we out of all the countries I've been to, more than 80, and I mean honestly been to. I'm not talking airport stops. That would be way over 100. I'm talking the least racist country I've been to is definitely the United States, period. Nobody comes close. Yet it's made out to be the worst in the world. Why do we have millions of people trying to get to the United States of all colors, all religions? Everybody's trying to get to the United States or to get to Europe, but mostly they want to get to the United States because we are accepting. And the problem is our strength is being used as our weakness. At this point, mark my word, we're going into civil war.
Well, look, Mike, as long as we got politicians who are willing to accept the information operational piece, you and me were in Japan in 2015. You're warning about the information operation of the Congresswoman issue with those two Chinese gentlemen that were sitting in the audience. I was there briefing about what is happening with ISIS, and we knew that this was happening. When initially I looked at the pandemic, I was in Korea in December of 2019. Came back and initially wrote the article on the coronavirus based on everything we had talked about too. And even it was ready to go prior to the chief of mission out of China pulling at least 1,000 of our folks out. I had gone ahead and written it, but I couldn't even get it submitted here because the politicians at that time were bashing each other over their heads. These two political parties have absolutely destroyed this country because they only care about their freaking political party and the number of schmucks that they have that freaking constantly keep on getting reelected. As long as we get Americans who will walk in and vote for their political party regardless. Look at Illinois. I live in Illinois. We have more natural gas in Illinois than Saudi Arabia has oil. And we're in the red, and we have people leaving here. And even the person I ran in against in 2020, she lost majority of her district because we just don't have enough people staying here. But guarantee you, people will walk in and they will still vote for the same political party. Why? Because that's the political party I was born in. You're destroying the nation because one congresswoman picked up the phone and her staffers answered a question that your grandmother had on Medicare. Well, go Google search it yourself and solve that issue. You don't need to constantly for 20 years keep on voting the same person in because they answered one of your Medicaid questions for your grandmother as the entire nation is being destroyed. Michael Prejean, who's been on my show before, was testifying when I was running the Syrian military force structures in Syria and Iraq. And when he testified as what is happening in Syria, he was asked under the previous leadership in the Obama administration, but if we go ahead and target, literally, they said if we target those oil tankers that are coming through the south of the Sinjar line that are going into Turkey, that is being sold on the cheap to the Europeans for money that is feeding ISIS, you're creating environmental hazard by destroying trucks that have oil in them that are driving through Syria. They didn't care about the fact that certain Christians were getting butchered in bull shoals. They only cared about the fact that we don't want to create this environmental hazard. Who feeds all this information? The Chinese Communist Party that initially looks at every country from an information operational perspective before they do anything else. And today, who's waiting for Afghanistan to finally settle itself is the Chinese Communist Party that is going to go in there and they're going to take wads of American cash that's been fed into them by American companies who have made themselves prostitutes to the Chinese. And then they're going to turn around and they're going to buy whatever they need in Afghanistan. And if somebody doesn't listen to them in Afghanistan, they're going to just end up putting a round through their heads, which Americans are not the ones who do that. So they know exactly how to play the game. Everything that is coming to the southern border is tied to what the global adversaries are trying to see of what they want to do here. We got the pandemic that I got my kids here have to go to school wearing a mask that doesn't work to block the coronavirus to begin with, but yet they have to wear it for the entire time they're in school. That is supposedly the reason why we're locking down our economy. But yet we have let the southern border be open in order for people to come in, and we give U.S. taxpayer funded money and we buy their ticket and we ship them off everywhere in the United States without mandating a shot for them, without mandating anything else, without even checking to see if they're sick or not. And then we turn around and wonder why we have so many spikes in all these states because of the pandemic. It makes no sense, but it's a reality. These two political parties have constantly burned this nation into the ground, and they will continue to do so as long as you keep on walking in and keep on voting for your political party in the state that has destroyed you. My recommendation has been the only way you could fix it is you got to walk in, whether you like it or not, we'll straight ticket and knock out the people who are causing this issue right now. And until you're willing to do that, people tell me all the time, well, there's good people in the Democratic Party, there's good people in the Republican Party, depending on where it is. There are a lot of good people in Germany, but they still burn the Jews into crisp in their ovens. You cannot allow a political party to destroy a nation. You need to get rid of these people. You need to make that change. Enough is enough. Mike, I know we're coming up almost on an hour. We went a little bit longer, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to discuss these important issues that are right now in our view and focus. If people want to read more about you, Mike, what is next on your agenda, and where can they go to read more about you?
Next on the agenda, I'm deciding now. I'm looking at some messages from some friends and associates. I may actually go to Texas to check out our border situation closer to home, or I may go to a few other places, which I won't say right now. But right now, I'm making up my mind. Where's the smartest place to go to keep my finger on the pulse on the most important matters? I want to say again, this pandemic is obviously serious. It's obviously real. But on the scale of pandemics, I've read almost 60 books on pandemic at this point, 60, not 16. I'm reading one now on rabies, of all things. But I've studied pandemic a lot. I've noticed, because pandemic, famine, war, you have to study these things, all three of these things, and information war, human migration. These are all things that you have to study to try to create a paradigm that is predictive, so that you can predict what's coming next. Nobody's going to be perfect with their predictions, but to be more accurate than the curve, it takes a great deal of study and a great deal of looking around, right? To get out here on the ground and move around. That's why I was just in Africa and just in Europe. I'm out here looking on the edges. So I'm constantly going out and coming back, so that I can check out the different data points firsthand with my knowledge, and not filtered through journalists who have never been out there on the front lines and don't know what they're looking at or how to analyze it. So I want to say very clearly, you need to be prepared. As I said in January of 2020, look at my Jordan Harbinger show interview that I did in January of 2020. I said very clearly, 2019 is dead. This is January of 2020. I was saying this. We're not going to go back to normal. Most people didn't even know we're in a pandemic yet when I did that interview. 2020 could be challenging. This could affect Trump. He may lose re-election. I was saying this in January of 2020 on the Jordan Harbinger show. It's online, that he may lose the election because of the pandemic. Of course, now we know there's a lot of other things going on besides the pandemic. And then throughout, restaurants could be closed. People said you're crazy. Restaurants could be closed. Airlines could be closed. All these things could be closed. And I said, well, I'm just a war correspondent, just the most experienced living American war correspondent around. I'm constantly out here in the wars. And I'm telling you, these things can be closed, and they were, right? And now I'm, as I said in that interview, 2021 will be a very interesting year. I had no idea what it's going to look like, but here we are. Now we're in it. And I can tell you this, 2022, I think it's going to be far more, let's say, energetic than 2021. I think we are clearly slipping into a kinetic civil war. We're in the front tendril of it right now. And at this point, there's nothing happening to ameliorate the situation. Migrants are coming over the border in the United States in waves right now. And anybody down there, well, you can probably see it in your neighborhood right now if you're in the United States. Some fish just don't in aquarium. And if you bring in groups that are too large, they will not assimilate whatsoever. They're not going to join the army. They're not going to become Americans in the sense that you and I are. Sargis, we're both either migrants or descendants of migrants. We've assimilated completely. We're Americans. And so many of these are not. They're coming in. The numbers are too large, and we're just giving stuff out. The economy's not going to be able to handle it. Inflation is obviously going up, which I warned about, and I'm not an economist, but these things always happen in these situations. You don't have to be an economist to notice the patterns. I'm telling you, if you read just 5 or 10 books on pandemic, you'll see a lot of these things that doctors, including virologists, are saying today. A lot of these people study their particular field, say virology or immunology or whatever, but they don't study the history of pandemics. Some people do, but if you study pandemics, if you read, like again, I've read almost 60 books on pandemic. Before this pandemic started, it was about 40, and then I read another 20 since then. You will see clear patterns. Like there's always a Fauci. People are like, these things have never happened before. I'm like, yeah, they have. They happen 1,000 times. You just don't read about them because you're not studying. These things are normal. Everything that's happening now is normal, except that it's happening at a larger and more accelerated pace because we have airplanes now. We have ships that are very fast. We have internet and interconnectivity. And we have, other issues, people that are weaponizing all these things for information war. This is a very serious situation. And 2022 is going to be a very interesting year. And if I were you, I would stock up on food. I would make it used to be they would call you crazy to be a prepper. Now you're a crazy if you're not a prepper. In fact, you'll be looked at as a very low IQ person. A very low IQ person is the type that are not preppers today, because we're coming into it right now. And the fewer people that are prepared, the more stressed it'll be on those of us who are.
It's a shame we got to this point, but we got here because one or two individuals have to constantly get reelected for office. It is what it is. We did it to ourselves, and we can make that change. Mike, with that said, what I want to do as we close out our show to our audience, we're going to go ahead and show at least 12 minutes of the video that you had put together. There's larger portions, but I thought these were the 12 significant points, and we saw a portion of that before we began our New Paradigm show. Again, that's why we call the show New Paradigm, to give new perspective on how we need to change our approaches. But that said, I also want to say that for those who view us, the production for these shows and every show I've done is with Cinema Production. They've done an outstanding job producing these shows for us. And also, I know that Mike is on Locals. You like what he writes, what he does. He needs your support. Please go to his Locals channel and donate and support him. For us from the Near East side, there's a 501c3, United Assyrian Appeal, that we have supported in the past. I'm also on Locals as of recently. But if you like the type of work we do, at least donate to the 501c3s that we support, in this case, United Assyrian Appeal. And please help Mike and go to Locals, his channel, Michael Yon, and support him. With that all said, this New Paradigms. God bless you, Mike.
Thanks, Sargis. It's always an honor to come on.
So I met this Somali woman in Tapachula who came through here about 6 weeks ago. And she said, I said, did anybody die? And she said, man, there's dead people everywhere. I saw all kinds of dead bodies. She said people fall off of things, they drown, they get washed away, they die of dysentery, just everything. And she said there were several people who were still alive, but couldn't go any further. They couldn't walk. And so they were just waiting to die out there. One woman was a big, heavy-set woman that couldn't make it up the hill of death. And so she had been out there, she said, for 24 days. People kept feeding her, but she couldn't go back and she couldn't go forward. So she said she was just waiting for God to take her. And we got Michael Yon here. This feels a lot like Apocalypse Now. You're like Marlon Brando.
Yeah.
That's right.
The Ohio River, sir? Yeah. No, the Turquesa.
You just sit in the boat and go like, rub your head. That's right.
All right.
I don't want to go and do something.
The water's already pretty high. I wonder about, what's that? Yeah, it's higher than I've ever seen it. But welcome to the rainy season.
Lightning like crazy. Very close strikes. Within like quarter mile less, actually, eighth of a mile maybe. Big strike just happened. We're gonna get in these boats. If we can get on the river's pretty full. So you can see it's gonna be a rough journey today, 3 hours in this rain. words before we go up Mount Everest?
This is going to be great. Epic. Right here. Looking forward to it. Let's make it happen.
Lions and lambs, been all over the world.
And still at it. Okay, let's go down that way. So we'll go down to the end and then out back.
We'll find out.
Yeah. Let's just wait here because they're going to come here.
Where are you from?
Cubano.
Where?
From Cuba.
Cuba. Okay. I've been there.
You? From?
United States.
United States?
Yeah. How long did it take you to get through the gap? You're very fit, so fast, I think.
My brother live in United States, Los Angeles, California.
Oh, really? In California?
We go, every people here,
Yeah.
every Cubans here go to the United States. American dream.
How
All
long?
my families there.
All in California?
Yeah, in California, in other states, but all in United States.
How'd you learn to speak English so well?
Because I work in Cuba in the market, in the hotels.
Yeah.
Guadalajara Beach, Pesquero in the Orient, in Cuba, and talk with the people. You know, sold I sold pieces of artesania.
Right?
Yeah, you know.
Yeah,
I
like
sold
arts and
artesania in
crafts.
Cuba, yeah.
Yeah. How long did it take you to get to the Darien Gap? How long did it take you to walk?
How long?
Walking.
Ah,
the jungle.
5 days.
5 days. Well,
Right.
you guys are fit. All together?
Inside in the hunger, you know,
All jungle.
for the river.
Was it dangerous?
Yeah, many people dead. You know.
And your group
Yeah.
died? How many?
I say seven, eight people.
In your group?
Yeah, in the trade, you know, when the river up,
Flood.
people, yeah, man.
They were Cubans?
Yeah, Cubans, black people, black people from Haiti,
Right.
yeah, many people
Ah,
there.
that's terrible.
It's not easy, but
Yeah. In your group?
yeah,
they died.
my group is 55 persons.
Yeah.
Yeah,
55?
Yeah, the group is 55 or 75.
How many died out of 55 or 75? How many?
It's depend because one people, two people.
I mean, in your group, how many?
Sometimes all the group,
Yeah.
you know,
sometimes.
sleep and the river up, and all the people that
Sleep beside the river.
yeah.
Yeah.
The river is and the you know the theft.
Robbers.
Yeah. That people 4 times.
Robbed you 4
Yeah.
times
4 times. Me 2 times.
with guns.
Yeah, with guns.
Did you keep
Yeah,
your
some
phone?
knife.
Knife.
Would you describe them, please? Describe the robbers.
Very simple.
Where they? What country do you think they're from? The robbers.
Panama.
Do you think the robbers
Aquí en Panamá.
are from here, from Panama,
From Panama, Costa Rica, all the countries.
Colombia?
No, Colombia is back.
No,
No,
the
se
robbers.
dice los
Ah, Colombia.
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 Colombia is.
No, pero más difícil aquí en Panamá.
Sí.
Were they on horses? robbers were on horses? Were they riding horses?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
riding
yeah,
horses?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Do they have
I'm
guns?
working too.
Do they have guns?
Yeah, yeah.
Many people died.
From the robbers or from the river?
No,
robbers
from
killed
the
them?
robbers. No.
You saw the robbers kill them? What did they do?
Nothing.
I mean, they shoot them or stab them or what?
Shoot. Because in 2 times, that people take all the money. And, 3 times, take. No money, no nothing. All my life.
Right.
And many people say I don't have money. And that look the back, and you have money. Boom. That. It's very common.
They were shooting women too?
Yes.
Women too.
How many people? How many gangsters?
Women with children.
They were
1 year.
They shot a woman with children?
Yes.
What happened to the children?
Killed.
They killed the children? Where was she from? Or the children and the mother?
Cuba.
From Haiti,
Venezuela.
from Venezuela.
Haiti.
But did you see this happen? You saw them kill a woman and children?
Yes.
Hola. 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 And then, hola. Hola. Excuse me. Excuse me.